Welcome to my channel. I hope today's story captures your interest and leaves you wanting more. Your continued support truly means a lot to me. Now, let's get started with the story.
It wasn't rage that made me leave. Not shame either. It was the precision of her words, like scalpels. You don't bleed right away from that kind of wound. You go cold first. We were lining up for the group photo at her cousin's wedding. Layla insisted we both come. I didn't know the bride, barely knew the groom. Still, she said it would look good for us to show up together. She said the family needed to see stability. That word stuck with me. Stability. I'd given her that. I paid for that. I became the quiet man in the background to preserve her illusion. And then, just as the photographer started calling names, she leaned in close, her breath sweet with champagne. "Get out of the shot," she whispered. "Your face is ruining the aesthetics." I didn't misunderstand her. Her voice was soft, but deliberate. Not a joke, not a slip, a sentence carved clean. I remember blinking, that's all. Not replying, not flinching. Just one blink, one moment where the world tilted sideways and everything behind her eyes came into focus. The disdain, the calculation, the distance she wore like perfume. She pulled back and smiled. One arm curled around the bride, the other posed delicately at her hip. The camera clicked, and I walked away. One step back, then another. The grass damp against my shoes. The laughter behind me already shifting to some other moment, some other photo. No one called after me. No one saw me leave, or they did and said nothing, which felt the same. I passed the bar. The bartender gave me a nod. I'd tipped him earlier. I didn't return the gesture, just moved past the roses, past the string lights. When I reached the parking lot, I pulled the keys from my inner pocket. Her car. She always drove it. She called it a clean line between us. I paid the note, she drove the wheel. Symbolic. Started to rain halfway through the drive. Not heavy, not yet. Just a thin mist brushing across the windshield like breath. I didn't put on music. Didn't turn on the GPS. I just drove. I don't know what I expected. Some message? Some regret? Layla had always been a master of the delayed apology. A text hours later. A quiet, "I didn't mean it," when no one else could hear. But this time, the silence was louder than anything. 40 miles later, I found a motel tucked between two truck stops outside Savannah. Neon sign flickering. Vacancy guaranteed. I didn't have a bag. No change of clothes. Just my blazer, my phone, my wallet. The room was cold when I stepped in. I didn't bother adjusting the thermostat. Just sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the TV, off, blank, waiting for something to fill it. I kept replaying the moment. The lace on her dress. The shimmer of the bride's earrings. The way the flashbulbs made everyone look softer, younger, more whole. And then her voice again. "Your face is ruining the aesthetics." That's what I was to her. Not a husband. Not a partner. Just a wrinkle in the picture she wanted the world to see. Layla had always lived for perception. Everything staged. Everything practiced. She ironed her outfits 3 days in advance. She took 30 photos before posting one. When we fought, and we did often, she always waited until the walls were thick and the neighbors were gone. "Control the narrative," she used to say. But something shifted after we got married. She stopped pretending for me, started saving the performance for everyone else. Her friends got the affection. Her family got the charm. I got what was left, the cold backstage version of the woman they all adored. I sat in that room for hours. Phone face down on the side table. Suit still on. No shower. No lights. I could feel the imprint of her sentence on my skin, like a bruise waiting to surface. At 1:34 a.m., my phone buzzed. One message. Mandy, Layla's closest friend. The maid of honor tonight. She'd watched me from across the table during dinner. Her smile tight, her eyes nervous. "She can't stop crying," the message read. Not, "She's sorry." Not, "She didn't mean it." Just a transmission. A signal passed down like a radio dispatch from the front. I didn't respond. Not out of spite. I had nothing left to say. I laid back on the stiff motel mattress and stared at the ceiling. Every breath I took felt borrowed. Not mine, not yet. The silence was loud. There were no cars outside, no footsteps in the hall. Just the occasional hum of the vending machine by the ice machine. My body still held the tension of the night. The smile I'd worn through dinner, the forced laughter during the toasts, the hand I kept on her lower back even when she didn't notice. How many hours had I spent learning her moods, reading the space between her sentences, making myself smaller, quieter, easier to love? How many times had I been told I was lucky to be with her? As if beauty erased cruelty. There was a photo from the wedding posted before I left. I saw it while I was driving, the preview flashing on the lock screen. Layla in the center, arm draped around the bride. Behind them, champagne glasses mid-toast. Her smile perfect. Not a single trace of me in the frame. I imagined the caption. Something about love. We're chosen family. We're curated bliss. I turned the phone over again, screen down, and closed my eyes. Somewhere in that motel room I stopped being her husband. Not legally, not officially, but something broke in me that couldn't be repaired with words or gifts or carefully rehearsed apologies. She wanted me out of the picture, so I left it. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just went quiet inside. And sometimes silence is the loudest thing a man can give. Because when someone shows you your place, not as a partner, not as a man, but as a blemish on the photograph of their life, you either learn to vanish or you learn to walk away. That night, I chose the latter. I woke up before the sun. Motel curtains drawn tight. No alarm. Just the light creeping through the seams like a warning. I hadn't really slept. Just drifted in and out of that dull half-state where your body forgets it's allowed to rest. My phone was still face down. I turned it over. Nothing. No message from Layla. No missed calls. Just Mandy again, 2 messages. Both from sometime past 2 a.m. The first read, "Did you even read what I sent last night?" The second, "She's in shock. She can't believe you actually left." I stared at the screen. Can't believe. That phrase twisted something in me. Not sorry. Not ashamed. Just surprised. Like walking away from being humiliated was a breach of etiquette. Like she'd expected I'd stay, even after that. Even after your face is ruining the aesthetics. I let the phone fall to the mattress. Sat up. The room smelled like mildew and stale coffee. I peeled off the blazer, finally, and stared at the reflection in the dark TV screen. I looked tired. Hollow. Not ruined, not yet, but worn in all the places no one sees. I'd given too much time to someone who measured value in appearances, not presence. I was never the prize in her eyes, just the cost of stability. That morning, I got in the car and drove again. I didn't go home, didn't go to work. I pointed the car north until I reached Charleston, a city I hadn't seen since college. Familiar streets, different man. I found a short-term apartment with utilities already on. A studio with old hardwood floors and too much light. No furniture yet. Just a mattress on the floor and a folding chair by the window. I dropped my phone into a drawer and shut off notifications. The silence was sudden. Thick. Welcome. That first day I walked for hours. Through the old markets. Past the cobblestone alleys and moss-covered walls. I passed tourists taking photos of buildings I used to drink coffee beside. At one point, I stepped into a bookstore I used to know. The same man still ran the register. He didn't recognize me. I didn't blame him. I barely recognized myself. On the second morning, I opened my email for the first time. Not Layla. Not Mandy. Just bills. A bank notification. And a dinner receipt from 2 nights ago, the wedding reception. I stared at the total. $462.86. I paid the whole thing. Split between 20 people, maybe. But the waiter brought the bill to me. Because I always paid. Because I always had. Even when I was the outsider, the afterthought, the man standing behind Layla's practice smile. The man who didn't match the picture but picked up the check anyway. I saved the receipt. Not to gloat. Not for proof. Just to remember. A marker. Because no one would thank me. Not her. Not Mandy. Not anyone at that table who raised their glasses and laughed while I stood behind the lens, fading into the background. I had become invisible in a life I had helped build. I didn't reach out, didn't text, didn't send some passive, bleeding message like, "I just need time." I had already given too much time. Now I was reclaiming mine. In the afternoon, I bought a cheap desk and set up my laptop. Logged into work, sent a message to my manager that I'd be remote for a few weeks. She didn't ask questions. Just said, "Hope everything's okay." Everything wasn't. But I didn't owe her the story. I barely owed it to myself anymore. That night, Mandy messaged again. "Still nothing?" "She's breaking down. She keeps saying you'll come home when you calm down." I stared at the message for a long time. Calm down. As if I had exploded. As if my absence was a tantrum, not a choice. As if walking away from humiliation was irrational. I typed one sentence. If her feelings need proof to be real, they're not real. Then I deleted it. Closed the app. I wasn't writing for them anymore. I spent that week in silence. No TV. No music. Just the creaking floorboards and the occasional passing car. My meals were simple: a sandwich, a bowl of soup. I didn't drink. Didn't need to. Each day felt like peeling off another layer of someone else's life. Layla had always lived like she was on a stage. Everything rehearsed. Even our arguments had cues. She cried exactly once every third fight. She'd leave the room, slam the door, wait 20 minutes, then come back with a trembling voice and a story from her childhood that explained why she couldn't change. She cried when she got caught in a lie. She cried when she needed me to forgive her. She cried when someone else was watching. She never cried when I did. And I did. Once. A year into the marriage. In the kitchen, when I realized I'd been working 70-hour weeks to support a life that didn't include me. She stood there, frozen, eyes blank. No hand on my shoulder. No word of comfort. Just studied silence, like she was calculating how long to wait before changing the subject. That was when I first suspected. She didn't want a partner. She wanted a prop. Something to hold her coat, pay the bills, pose beside her for pictures, until the lighting was wrong. I ignored it, pushed it down, told myself I was being dramatic. But now the evidence was stacked too high to pretend. In Charleston, I started keeping notes. Little observations. Not journals, not prose. Just facts. Layla hasn't called. Mandy's still mediating. Wedding photos posted. I'm in none of them. She used our shared credit card to buy a new dress yesterday. $219.48. I stared at that last one longer than the rest. I had vanished. And still, she used my resources. Still, she dressed herself in comfort I paid for. That's the thing about people like her. They're more addicted to the performance than the partner. The story must go on, even if the actors change. By the end of the week, I had received a total of 7 messages from Mandy, all phrased as if I were the one who owed an explanation. She's not eating. She's spiraling. She didn't mean it. I didn't reply, because here's the truth. When someone treats you like an accessory, your disappearance becomes a costume change. Not a tragedy. Not a crisis. Just a replacement. And the more time passed, the more I began to see how much of my life had been staged. The date nights, posted but never enjoyed. The vacations, curated for photos, arguments between every shot. The spontaneous gifts, pre-planned, price-tagged, returned days later. She cried at her own birthday toast once. Not because she was moved, but because the video would look more authentic that way. Her words, not mine. Even our wedding vows, hers were printed on antique paper, rehearsed for cadence, timed to music. I said mine from memory, from the heart. She rolled her eyes when I forgot a line. That memory came back to me in a grocery store aisle, holding a box of cereal I hadn't bought in years. She hated it, said it made her feel poor. I bought it now out of spite, or maybe freedom. The line blurs after a while. On the 9th day, I turned my phone back on, not because I missed her, but because I wanted to see if she'd tried. She hadn't. No calls. No messages. Just one tagged photo on social media, her at brunch. Smiling. Surrounded by friends. Caption. Starting over never looked this good. I laughed. Actually laughed. Not bitter. Not hurt. Just tired. The kind of laugh that says, of course. Of course she's moved on. Of course I was a background character in her story. Of course. I turned the phone off again. This time for good. Because I'd seen what was real. And what wasn't. She loved the idea of me. Not the weight. Not the man. She loved what I could offer. Not what I carried. She loved the image. Not the presence. And when the image cracked, she told me I didn't belong in the frame. So I stayed out of it. The email came on the third day. No greeting. No apology wrapped in legal language. Just a subject line stripped of courtesy, vehicle and property retrieval. I opened it once, read it twice, and felt nothing. My client requests the immediate return of the vehicle and all personal belongings. It said. Not asks. Requests. As if I were a clerk who'd misplaced something. As if leaving the wedding hadn't been a rupture, but theft. I forwarded it to my lawyer without comment. She called an hour later. Calm voice. Veteran patience. This isn't about logistics, she said. It's about reasserting control. She's panicking. I believed her. Layla had never handled loss well. She could dismiss people, discard them, humiliate them quietly. But she couldn't stand when someone stepped out of her script. Especially not publicly. Especially not without begging first. That afternoon, my lawyer confirmed something else. Layla had contacted a realtor. Tried to list the condo. Our condo. The one I'd put the down payment on. The one she decorated for Instagram, not living. There was already interest. A buyer. But no paperwork. No authority. She assumed you'd fold. The realtor said, voice tight. She told him you were being difficult. I smiled at that. Difficult. A word people use when obedience expires. We froze the listing within the hour. Sent a cease and desist that spoke louder than any argument ever had. And that's when the calls started. I didn't answer the first one. Or the second. Or the third. The fourth went to voicemail. Her voice was sharp at first. Accusatory. You're sabotaging me, she said. Then it cracked. Not sadness. Frustration. People are asking questions. They think I've lost it. Are you happy now? I saved the message. Not out of spite. Out of instinct. That night, I walked the Charleston streets longer than usual. The air was thick. Summer settling in. I passed couples laughing over drinks, hands brushing, lives still intact. I felt strangely untouched by it. Like I'd already crossed into a quieter country. Layla sent 2 more messages the next day. One logistical. One emotional. Neither took responsibility. Both assumed compliance. She wanted the car returned by Friday. She wanted to talk. I didn't respond. On Friday morning, my lawyer sent another email on my behalf. Neutral. Firm. Arrangements for property exchange would proceed through counsel only. No personal contact. That's when the panic sharpened. Layla called my work. HR forwarded the message. She called my sister. She called Mandy again, this time frantic. Mandy texted me screenshots. Layla crying in a cafe. Layla shaking. Layla saying she didn't think he'd actually leave. That line stuck with me. Didn't think I'd actually leave. As if leaving humiliation was an overreaction. As if dignity was a bluff she'd called too late. By the weekend, the tone changed. No more commands. Just confusion. Bargaining. We can reset, she wrote. Every marriage has moments. She added a heart emoji, like punctuation could soften memory. I ignored it. On Sunday, I returned to the condo. Early. Building staff let me in without questions. They'd seen this before. The place felt staged. Too clean. Too hollow. Like a showroom abandoned mid-sale. I took only what was mine. Documents. Laptop. An old hoodie she hated because it made me look unpolished. A few framed photos she'd never bothered to hang. In the bedroom, I found a wedding card tucked behind a drawer. Wishing you love for a lifetime. It read. I left it there. When I locked the door for the last time, I didn't feel loss. Just finality. That evening, in my new apartment, the view unfamiliar but honest, Layla sent one last text. Good luck. No apology. No warmth. Just a closing line. I typed the same 2 words back. No punctuation. No emotion. Then I blocked her number. Control doesn't disappear loudly. It slips. Quietly. And when the person who depended on it realizes it's gone, panic fills the silence they never thought they'd have to face. I slept that night without dreams. It was a Tuesday when I went back to finish the job. Early again. Right after sunrise. The city was still groggy, streets half asleep. I brought a duffel bag, nothing more. I didn't expect confrontation. Layla was too image-conscious to show up in person. But I wore boots, not dress shoes. Some part of me still braced for impact. The building concierge handed me the spare key without comment. His eyes flicked to mine, curious, but he said nothing. I respected that. The elevator hummed as it climbed. Floor 7. The place we'd called home for 3 years. The space, she said, was us. Open floor plan. Gray walls. Glass coffee table I hated but paid for. The moment I opened the door, the air told the story. Cold, staged, untouched. She'd taken most of her things already. The vanity was empty. Her perfume bottles gone. No makeup trays. No jewelry on the nightstand. Just an empty indentation on the carpet where her dresser used to be. I moved through each room slowly. Not out of nostalgia. Out of inventory. The way a landlord walks through a unit after a tenant breaks the lease. I gathered what was mine. A box of tax documents. Old pay stubs. A watch I hadn't worn since our anniversary dinner 2 years ago. The one where she spent most of the meal scrolling through photos, editing captions while I cut into cold steak. I left the silverware. I left the blender she swore she needed but never used. In the hallway closet, I found one last box I hadn't expected. My books. Philosophy. History. A few old journals. She tucked them away like clutter. Out of sight. Out of frame. I opened one journal, notes from before we were married. Back when I still wrote about hope. I flipped the pages carefully. There was an entry marked in ink. She makes me feel seen, even when she doesn't say it. Maybe that's enough. I stared at that line for a while, even when she doesn't say it. What a dangerous lie. I packed the books. In the living room, the couch remained. Minimalist, uncomfortable, pristine. She'd insisted on white. Said it made the space look clean. I wasn't allowed to eat on it. Or nap on it. It was for guests, she said. For photos. We never had guests. On the coffee table sat a half-burned candle. Lavender. One of the few things that smelled like her. I left it. On the fridge, I found an envelope. My name on the front. Her handwriting. Inside was a printed list. Bullet points. Return car by end of week. Forward mail to new address. Signed separation agreement. Draft attached. Contact building office parking spot. No signature. No salutation. Just a list. Like closing a business deal. I didn't take it. Just folded it and left it on the counter. In the bedroom, I stood for a while. The bed stripped. Mattress bare. Dust lines where picture frames had been. For a second, just a second, I remembered her laugh. The early days. When she used to fall asleep with her hand on my chest. Before we stopped touching at night. Before we became co-stars in a play with no audience. I sat on the edge of the bed. Same spot I used to sit while she picked earrings. Asked for my opinion. Never took it. Always changed her mind. But asked anyway. I realized then, she didn't want answers. She wanted presence. A witness. Someone to nod while she chose herself again. That's what I had been. A man-shaped mirror. Reflecting the image she curated. I left the bedroom light on when I walked out. Not on purpose. I just forgot to flip the switch. Downstairs, I returned the key. The concierge looked at me with something between sympathy and relief. Still no words. Just a small nod. Like we both understood what silence was worth. Back at the Charleston apartment, the space felt warmer. Not because of furniture, I still didn't own much, but because nothing in it was pretending. I hung up one photo, just one. Me on a hike in Asheville years before Layla. Sweat on my brow. Mud on my boots. Alone, smiling, real. That night I cooked for myself. Real food, not the packaged meals she favored. She once told me cooking was too domestic. She said men should order. That kitchen counters were for flowers, not flour. I made pasta, burned the garlic, laughed when the sauce spattered on the wall. Didn't clean it right away. Let it dry. At 9:02 p.m. my phone buzzed. A new number. No name. One message. Good luck. I knew it was her. The period gave it away. She hated punctuation. Said it ruined flow. But when she was being careful, when she wanted to seem composed, she always used it. I stared at the message. Not warm. Not cruel. Just final. I typed the same 2 words. No punctuation. No warmth. Then I blocked the number. That was the last time I heard from Layla. No calls. No letters. Just echoes. In the weeks that followed, the silence held. Mandy stopped messaging. Our mutual friends faded like fog. I wasn't invited to the next birthday dinner. No one asked for my side. That's how these things go, people choose gravity. And Layla had always been better at pulling others into her orbit. But I didn't miss them. I missed routine, the idea of home, the illusion of belonging. But not them, not her, because what we had wasn't love. It was alignment, a performance where I built the stage and she danced across it. And when the lights dimmed, she walked off, left me sweeping the floor. There were no fireworks when I left. No screaming, no slammed doors. Just a man stepping out of a room and not returning. And that's what made it real. You see, anger gives people a story. Drama gives them something to retell. But silence? Silence makes them question themselves. Did I go too far? Was I cruel? Did he really leave for good? That's the punishment she never prepared for. Not revenge. Not a replacement. Just absence. A space she couldn't fill with filters or captions. I kept the car another week. Then returned it to her lawyer's office. Parked it out front. Left the keys in an envelope. No note. I never saw her again. And I didn't need to. Because the moment she looked at me at that wedding, the moment she said those words through clenched teeth, "Your face is ruining the aesthetics," I became something else. Not her husband. Not her partner. Not even her memory. Just gone. And sometimes the cleanest break is the one no one hears. I didn't expect regret. Not really. Not from her. But it found its way back. Not through apology. Not through Mandy. But through paper. 2 weeks after the silence, a thick envelope showed up at my Charleston door. Postmarked from Atlanta. Legal return address. I knew the tone before I opened it. The brittle edge of paperwork dressed up as closure. Inside was the draft agreement. Separation of assets. Distribution of liabilities. It read like a shopping list of things she never paid for. The car. The condo. Utility balances. Subscriptions. Furniture. Each line item tied to me. My name. My signature. My account numbers. She had lived like a queen in a palace she didn't own. And now, she was walking away without the crown or the cost. Tucked at the end was a handwritten note. 2 sentences. Let's do this clean. No resentment. We both played our parts. I read it 3 times. First with disbelief. Then with anger. Then with clarity. We both played our parts. As if betrayal were a scene in a script. As if her cruelty was choreography and I had agreed to dance. But I hadn't. I had built the stage. Paid for the lights. Nailed down every board with hands blistered from holding up the weight of her ambition. And now she wanted a clean exit. I took the agreement to my lawyer. She scanned it. Red-penned it. Slid it back to me with one word. No. So I sent back my version. Every asset that bore my name stayed mine. No negotiation. No compromise. Her response came not in paper, but in silence. That was her tell. When Layla didn't respond, it meant she'd lost leverage. And with silence came the ripple. A mutual friend called me. Said Layla was looking for a short-term rental. Said she was between accounts. Said the furniture company had repossessed the custom bed frame she'd financed in my name. The bill was coming due, and for once I wasn't the one paying. 3 days later, Mandy broke the quiet. Sent a message that read, "She's unraveling. She thought you'd cave. She didn't plan for this." Of course she didn't. She never paid attention to structure, only to sparkle. And when sparkle fades, what's left? Debt. Loneliness. A woman alone in a borrowed apartment filled with nothing but mirrors and noise. I didn't reply to Mandy. Not out of pride. Out of purpose. Some lessons only hold when they arrive late, when the silence itself is louder than any lecture. By the end of the month, the paperwork was final. Filed. Notarized. Done. I was no longer her husband, but the debt, hers, mine, ours, still hung in the air. Not financial, moral, because the cost of building someone's dream life without ever being part of the dream is a debt you don't get to collect. You just stop paying and watch what collapses.